The 10.18 patch notes have finally dropped today, guys. We can see we've seen massive changes and buffs to Ahri. We saw buffs to Kayle. Rumble has been buffed. Galio nerfed. Kog'Maw nerfed. And Set nerfed. Now, the Kayle and the Set nerfs, look, I don't really think they're that relevant to the mid lane. The Kog'Maw nerf hurts him a little bit. His armor scaling, I believe, has been reduced. So this into 80 matchups, if you're playing him mid, will hurt a little bit. But at the end of the day, the Kog'Maw should always been used to counterpick things like the Zoe and the Azir, and never really a blind pick. Starting off, I want to go over the mini rework they've done with Ahri. There's a lot of potential here for you guys to abuse this early on, okay? I dead set think Ahri is overtuned on this patch as it's been released. I think they're going to have to hotfix nerf it or nerf it on next patch. Take a little bit of this movement speed away, I believe. They've just kitted her a little bit too much. And below Master tier and even below Diamond, this pick is going to be S tier. Obviously, in Challenger games, Ahri is still going to be a little bit trash because there's better picks. But in the lower elos, this Ahri setup with the Glacial is going to be so disgusting. They've made the healing a lot easier to activate. They've made her W give you 40% movement speed, and it does 200% damage now to low health minions, and it focuses these low health minions away. So in the lower elos, it's going to make CSing a lot easier. It's going to allow you to have more mobility to evade ganks. Just press your W, get a burst of 40% movement speed, which will decay. If you want to set up your E, if you want to chase somebody, I think Ahri, they've just made the champion so easy, and it's so smooth at the moment that I think, guys, if you're below Diamond, jump in on this Ahri hype train. Do the Glacial setup, GLP, Spooky Ghost with like a Dark Seal into the Medjais. You want to get like a Death Cap, and you'll just steamroll games, guys. A lot of people won't really understand the changes to Ahri at the moment, and they won't anticipate the movement speed at the moment because a lot of people, let's be real, they don't even read the patch notes. They don't even understand what's going on. Get in quick, abuse the Ahri, boys. I'm telling you, it's God tier. Now, Galio got a small change. He has 10 base damage off the Q. It's going to hurt his wave clear and poke a little bit. At the end of the day, Galio's so overtuned and easy to play that he's still going to be up in the God tiers. It's not going to take enough away from the champion to really put him down. Kayle has been slightly changed. I think these changes are irrelevant to the mid lane. Kog'Maw, you see the health growth and the armor growth has been dropped a little bit. Kog'Maw mid, it's a counter pick to Azir and Zoe. Other than that, I wouldn't recommend the Kog'Maw. Rumble's Q damage been buffed quite a lot, especially in the later stages of the game. 315 at max rank to 340 at max rank. So Rumble, he got a lot of his W shielding nerfed because he could sustain matchups. But now, because you don't have that shield, it's going to be a little bit harder to play the lane. But there's even more upside now with more damage. Electrocute Ignite with Nimbus Cloak Rumble mid. It's super cheesy. It's super good into things like the Yone and the Yasuo. I recommend it to anybody. Set mid, look, if you're not a pro play, don't play set mid. Is that it? That's pretty much it for the mid lane, guys. There wasn't that many changes in this patch, but with my actual tier list, I'll be including Yone finally. I've got enough data. I've collected enough games on the champion to understand he's broken. So as you can see, this is the 10-18 solo queue tier list. The Ahri has managed to snake her way into the S tier. I think she's going to perform very good in this patch in the lower elos. I think she's super simple to play. They're even increasing the simplicity. I believe they're improving the animations to make her feel even cleaner. Jump in quick on this Ahri hype train. Next up is the Galio. As I said previously, the 10 damage base nerfs. It's not going to be enough to push him to A tier. Yes, he'll be a little bit weaker, but he's performing so well on last patch that it's not going to be enough to knock him down in comparison to the other picks. Yone has been performing very, very well. Over a 50% win rate with a huge play rate, only really close to the release. This tells me the champion is completely broken. He's a much easier to play Yasuo. I think it takes 5 games to not to master, but to get very good at this champion. In comparison, Yasuo is like 25 plus games to get good at. It's like a Yasuo with a get out of jail free card. So I think when mastered, these two champions, Yasuo might even be slightly better. The problem is, it takes so many games to get to that height that the Yone is just performing so good in solo queue if you're looking for some quick LP gains. Next up is the Fizz. Fizz is one of the best performers in solo queue. He's the best, one of the best roamers, assassins. That Mango Fish style, I have a video on him, guys. He's currently over 1,000 points in career. Rush your Hourglass, get that CDR, start diving your opponents, take over the game. Next up, best control mage, period, is the Orianna, performing very well. There's a lot of builds you can get for that Seraphs if you want some shielding. You can go for the Ludens if you want some extra damage. You can go for the GLP if you need slows. There's so many setups for Orianna, and in my opinion, she is the best blind pick at the moment. If you're a mage player like myself, I love it. Next up is the Twisted Fate. We've seen some issues with Twisted Fate. His win rate is slowly dropping off, especially with the things like Lucian mid coming into meta. But at the end of the day, I think Twisted Fate and Galio are probably the best like map holders and glue for the team if you're looking to kind of just be utility for the team and I guess influence the side of the maps without having to roam. Lastly, the Assassin Echo. We saw what Chovy could do with Echo against things like the Azir when that Hail of Blades takes over the laning phase. Echo at the moment is really good because, like, let's say you first pick Fizz. The enemy 100% knows it's Fizz. They're going to counterpick you with the Kassadin. If you first pick Echo, they're not sure. They think, maybe it's jungle. It's much harder to get a counterpick onto the Echo as it is to the Fizz. And this is why I like the pick so much in high elos for me. The enemies kind of struggle. It's a really good flex pick. A lot of the times I can pick it. If they pick the Kassadin, I can ask my jungler, hey, can you Echo? Sometimes they can. And that's the reason he's still up in the God tiers. Now talking about some of my A tier picks, you can see things like the Nocturne have dropped back. The Diana has slightly dropped back. I think these champions are still super good in solo queue, but they're becoming a little bit harder, especially the Nocturne, to kind of sustain all of these poke laners that are coming out. Things like the Lucian and the Orianna just bully you so much in the early game, it's very hard to hold on. I think Rumble is moved up into the A tier from B tier. I think this Q buff is going to help him out a lot. I think there's plenty of good matchups for the Rumble in the mid lane to pick him. Things like the Fizz, like the Yone, like the Yasuo, he does very well into. Even the Galio, he does very well into. Just be very careful when picking the Rumble. If they have really gank-heavy junglers, things like the Lee Sin or even Xin getting buffed this patch, just be a little bit careful if they're going to set it up with things like that AHRI, like that Twisted Fate. Anything with CC, you got to be a bit careful on that Rumble in the early game because you don't have any dashes. Moving across, I guess Lucian is probably the most popular pick on the upcoming. This Mana-Immune Lucian setup, okay? So you go for that Mana-Immune, you go for the IE, you go for that Mana-Immune Essence, IE, Rapid Fire into either Storm Razor or Situational. It's getting picked so often in pro play at the moment. We see Caps, we see Bjergsen, we see Chovy, we see all these high elo mid laners practicing it in solo queue, preparing for the pro stage. A lot of kill pressure. You almost have no bad matchups. This Lucian mid, if you're very mechanical or an 80 carry main that's filled to mid lane, maybe look to pick it up. Sylas moving down a little bit. Things like that Lucian, like the Orianna, it's so hard to survive these lanes. You need to be picking this Sylas into matchups where you have like the enemy has a Zillion, has a Malphite. Sylas is put into that S tier. But if the enemy doesn't really have a comp where their ultimates are like insane to steal in the mid late game, it's probably not going to be a good pick. Qiyana got a small nerf on 10-17. I think she's still a great roaming mid lane. Her and Talon are still performing very good with over 50% win rate. And then I guess lastly, Zoe is performing pretty good at the moment. You got to be careful though. Things like the Lucian are doing very well. Things like the Fizz also, you have to be very careful when picking the Zoe. But overall, super annoying champion to deal with. You should be able to take over the game and get some wins. Quickly talking about a couple of these B and C tier picks. At the end of the day, some of these picks are OTP. Things like the Akali or the Azir. You need a lot of games to make them work. They're better in pro play or high elo. In lower elos, I don't see why you're playing these champions as opposed to some of the S tiers. You see things like the Syndra, actually the lowest win rate mid laner at the moment. She's got nerf after nerf. And the problem in solo queue with Syndra is she has no mobility. A lot of lower elo players, sure, you can pick it and get a solo kill, but then you get caught out in the late game, and you lose the game because of your positioning. It's a very hard champion to position on. The E-Nurse make her a little bit more vulnerable. So Syndra at the moment, she's definitely dropping back. I don't recommend her at all for solo queue. There's much better control mages. What else can we talk about? Tristana, look, if you're looking for an AD mid, the Lucian at the moment is doing much better than the Tristana. Tristana got a pretty big buff on the E, but the matchups aren't that favorable for the Tristana. It's an all or nothing champion. If you want to hard engage and get a solo kill, you got to hard commit for it. As opposed to the Lucian, you can, it just provides a little bit more if you're looking for AD mids, the Lucian rather than the Tristana. Jace at the moment does pretty good if you're looking to a counter pick to the Lucian. If you see the enemy pick an AD carry and a Lucian, try and pick that Jace. It actually does very good to counter these champions. Poke them out from afar, look to all in, You should usually get the 100 to 0 if you have your summoners up. And what else can we talk about? Let's look at my C tiers. Corki, not performing very well. Ziggs got played a couple of times in pro play as a counter to Azir. Don't instantly think Ziggs is really strong and you should play it in solo queue. It's very immobile. It's very mana hungry. I don't think you should be playing Ziggs when there's, you got these things like the Orianna, like the AHRI. You've got so many better range champions than Ziggs. I don't see why you'd pick it in solo queue. What else can we talk? Oh, Irelia. I just did a video on Irelia. We saw Chovy's Irelia. Oh my god, it's so broken. That's Chovy's Irelia. The thing is, there's it's in like an immeasurable difference between a guy who has 10 games on Irelia and Chovy's Irelia. In order for Irelia to be perfect, you need to play 99 out of 100 scenarios to perfection. You need to play it absolutely perfect. Otherwise, you shouldn't be picking Irelia. Players like Chovy, players like TF Blade can do this. But your average player, probably like out of 100 scenarios, they play the right scenario. They probably right play 40 out of like 100 times or even less. And at that stage, you're just getting really bad returns on the champion. And you should be playing something more easier to execute or has a little bit of a stronger kit with not as many games. So that's it for my 10-18 solo queue rundown, guys. I hope you've enjoyed it and learned something. It's been a nice little rundown on what's happening in the meta and what champions you can abuse to climb some divisions on this patch. Until next time, I catch you later.